Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. The book I'd like to discuss today is Foundation and Empire by Isaac Asimov, published in 1952. So this is the second book in the Foundation trilogy, which is of course a timeless classic in science fiction. Now, I read the first book, Foundation, last year, which I did enjoy, but it didn't exactly blow me away. Certainly the concepts and world building are very engaging, but it suffers a little bit from dry prose and not particularly interesting characters, in my opinion. But it's still worth a read for its captivating ideas and its classic SF antiquity value. And now I've finally read the sequel, Foundation and Empire. So, let's talk a little bit about what this series is about. This series is set in an intriguing distant future in which mankind has conquered the stars and we've got this vast empire that's spread across the galaxy. An empire that is in the process of decline. And this decline has been accurately foreseen through the efforts of one man, Harry Seldon. And this is very important to the backstory. This is quite integral to the series as a whole. Through the science of psychohistory, which is a method for making accurate predictions about the future using mathematics and statistical analysis, Seldon predicted the decline of galactic imperial power and the rise of barbarism across the whole galaxy. And what's more, Seldon projected that it would take 30,000 years before a new empire could emerge after the previous one collapses. So he came up with a plan to establish two foundations at opposite ends of the galaxy to preserve human knowledge and civilization. And the idea here is these foundations would survive and rise as the most powerful state while the empire is dying. And the success of this project would ultimately reduce the period for a second empire to emerge to just 1,000 years. It's not going to be easy though, as the Foundation will have to endure multiple crises and threats along the way. That's the basic premise of the first book. Now, in Foundation and Empire, the events that take place in this book occur a few hundred years after Seldon's death. And the Foundation has already gone through and overcome these various threats and crises, which themselves have all been predicted through Seldon's psychohistory. And in this book, we follow a couple of storylines. The first one is a novella called The General, and it's basically another one of these Seldon crises. And this concerns the efforts of one character, a fleet commander of the Galactic Empire, who wants to seek out and destroy the threat to imperial rule posed by the Foundation. This story follows a very similar pattern to previous narratives in the first book, in which we learn of the inevitable self-destructive course of imperial power. And this is totally in line with Seldon's psycho-historical model. So I don't really think that this first part of the book adds much to the story. Certainly the world that Asimov built is intriguing. This whole giant empire in decline, and there's quite a few neat ideas thrown into this part of the story. But it suffers from some of the problems which were apparent in the first book. So the writing style feels pretty dry and dated. It's very dialogue heavy. We get an awful lot of men talking in rooms. The characters aren't particularly memorable. So I think this first part of the book is nothing to write home about. But it's only 60 pages or so, at least in this edition. And then we move on to a second part of the story, a longer novella called The Mule. Now, this is where things start to get really interesting and the story takes off. So, the Empire has all but collapsed. The Foundation is seemingly secure at the start of the story. But suddenly, this whole social stability and equilibrium is thrown into turmoil by the sudden rise of an individual known as the Mule, who is quite a menacing character. He's a mysterious mutant who has an extraordinary ability to manipulate people and manipulate the emotions of others. And he intends to use this power to conquer the galaxy, ultimately. So he turns out to be a far more existential threat to the Foundation than the Empire ever was. Because as an individual, he circumvents all of the predictions of psychohistory that Selden came up with. He just doesn't fit into Selden's theories or model. And up until this point in the story, all of the Selden crises the Foundation faced, they never really felt too dramatic, in my opinion, because they were all foreseen. Selden knew they were coming, and the Foundation would ultimately prevail. And so it kind of, the way things pan out feels inevitable. So then there was never really much conflict. Now there is conflict, genuine conflict. No one knows how to deal with the Mule. No one understands who he is or what he is or how he is so effective, how he is so disturbingly skilled at manipulating people. So he's a very interesting character for sure. He's very mysterious, and I think he's by far the most interesting personality in the series so far. His presence into the story injects a much appreciated dramatic tension, I think, which wasn't really there up until this point. So I think ultimately this book is a step up from the first book because of this character of the Mule and the way events unfold surrounding him. It still retains some of the flaws of the first book, but the Mule storyline is sufficiently bold and intriguing that it felt more of a satisfying read overall. And we've also got a very neat and twisty climax, which, although I could see it coming from quite a long way off, it was still very interesting to watch unfold. So we retain some of the features of the first book which make it a classic, like the imaginative world building, the epic storytelling. But we've also got in this book, in the second novella at least, a more engaging plot that becomes increasingly captivating as the story progresses, and some more interesting characters. Not just the Mule, but some of the protagonists as well, I think, are more interesting in this part of the story. We even get a proper female character with an important role, something that has been conspicuously absent in the series so far. All in all, I'm very glad I read this book. And despite the shortcomings that I refer to in the first part of the novel, ultimately it was a very satisfying read, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. I am very excited and looking forward to see where it goes from here, because I've still got to read Second Foundation, the 3rd book in the series. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more sci-fi content.